everybody. My name is Matthew Harris. I'm coming to you live on the Matthew Harris Law YouTube channel. I'm an attorney here in West Texas, and today we're going to talk about something that's very recent in the news. If you've been living under a rock, then you might have missed the fact that there was an assassination attempt on President Trump's life over the weekend. What you might not know, though, is that immediately after there was, or immediately after the news broke, a shooter's name emerged. And unfortunately, the very first name that was named as the shooter ended up to not be the shooter. So we're going to discuss some of the legal pitfalls that come with that immediate reporting and trying to get that information out to the public as fast as people can. That intent to scoop everyone else, unfortunately, can lead to some dangers. But first, what I want to do is I want to say hello to a couple of people that are in the chat. Miss Dina, it's great to see you here this evening. Samantha, hey, it's great to see you in here as well. Miss Debbie, you finally made it for a live stream. It's so good to see you in here. Who else we have? Bodie, good evening. It's good to see you. Hi, Chad. How are you doing? Where are you coming from, Chad? Miss Debbie, you're just so full of love. I absolutely appreciate it. Mom of 10, it's good to see you as well. How are you doing this evening? Dave, good to see you. Elliot, yes, great to see you back. I enjoyed your input on the last live stream. So, you being a criminal defense law student, what law school are you at right now? I don't seem to recall. But we're going to discuss a couple of things that kind of intersect between civil and criminal on this evening's discussion. But while we're here, I see that we've got a question already. Dave, fake and false are not the same thing. One requires mens rea and the other is mistake of fact. I can get on board with that. I agree with that. Current Texas law enforcement, where are you at, Dave? And can you please tell us what an ATFPO is? Because that's a new term for me. I'm presuming USSS is the U.S. Secret Service. But Dave, I see that you have a question. So, from a legal standpoint, is the fake report of a shooting a strict liability crime? You know, there are very few crimes that are strict liability crimes. Most crimes, they require that, exactly like you pointed out, they require that mens rea element in order for there to be some sort of criminal intent. In some crimes, it's a lot lower than in others. However, no, I don't think that a fake report would be a strict liability crime because, as you know, a strict liability crime is a crime regardless of your mens rea, regardless of your intent. Smith County, is that over near Tyler? I've got family there in Tyler. Anti-terrorism force protection officer, fantastic. Well, I appreciate having you here, and that's a fantastic question. So, if you noticed, yeah, Tyler, I thought that was Tyler. All right, so did any of you hear the very first name that came out as the shooter against President Trump? Anybody hear that? Or was the very first name that you heard the actual shooter, Mr. Thomas Matthew Crooks? I'm curious what you all heard as this live news was breaking on Saturday. Okay, let's look at some of... That's great. All right, Alexander, it sounds like you didn't hear any other name first. Samantha, you just heard the actual shooter's name first. So there were... Let's look at... We're going to go to Twitter. Unfortunately, this happened on it. Well, I don't know that it started on Twitter. And today, since we're discussing defamation, let me preface this live stream with the fact that I have not conducted any independent research that some of these people, for example, as you see on the screen here, we have at Wall Street Silv, a Twitter handle by the name of Wall Street Silv. I have not conducted any independent research to know that Wall Street Silv actually posted this. And so this was something that was, what I'm showing you here is a tweet with this image. And so it looks like Maxwell Hauser. Yep, you saw that on Twitter. I say Twitter. I'm going to say Twitter until the day I die. It will never be X. Elon Musk, if you're watching, I'm sorry. I can't get on board. My brain is just already wired that way. So, yes, Brittany, it's fantastic to see you in here, Brat. So, let's talk about, like I said a moment ago, I'm prefacing this with the fact that I have not conducted any independent independent research to ensure that Wall Street Silv actually posted this. But this was a picture that was being floated around Twitter very early, very shortly after the shooting happened on Saturday. And so before we had any information, this is what we heard. We heard that per the Butler Police Department, the Trump shooter has been arrested at the scene and has been identified as Mark Violets, an Antifa member. Just prior to the shooting, Mark Violets uploaded a video on YouTube claiming justice is coming. I mean, if you were watching live like I was, I personally, I saw several other live streamers, people who were live streaming saw this and they put out this information immediately. And so I don't know how many people were very careful to note that this is alleged. This was the alleged shooter at the time, and to preface their, up to the minute, razor's edge report that this is the information coming across Twitter. Instead, what we heard from a lot of people was simply statements of fact, just simply, this is the information. Because if you'll notice, give me just a moment. So we've got a few of these to work through. And so I'm doing my best to get these set up so that way you all can see what I am seeing here. All right, so that Wall Street Silv, I'm not sure if that was the first one, but it was one of the firsts. And if you'll notice, there's another account. This came from, I'm not sure of the nationality, and I'm going to probably butcher it, but Mussolino, and I can't pronounce the name, but you can see that it's very similar information that was being put out almost immediately after the shooting on Saturday. I mean, if we look at the time here, well, I guess you'd have to know where this was located, where this person is tweeting from, because I don't have that information. But you can see whatever time it was midnight or 52 minutes after midnight on July 14th. And so this information was being published out there. And this one, I don't know. I don't know if this was the very first one, but I have some suspicions. And we're going to go in, and I'm going to show you why in just a minute, why I think this account that we see right here, this Mussolino, just take note of that, this Mussolino was the very first one that put this information out there. And we're going to go ahead and label this as misinformation because this is absolutely false. This Mark Violets, because as you can see, this is slightly different from what we saw just a moment ago of the Wall Street Silv account. This says, according to the Butler Police Department and the hashtag Trump shooter, or I'm sorry, the hashtag Trump shooter has been arrested at the scene and has been identified as Mark Violets. This one says a rabid Antifa member. And then before the attack, he uploaded a video on YouTube claiming justice was coming. And then it includes a whole bunch of hashtags. And as you can see, the way that this is posted, especially with this picture, it seems like this is the picture that's referring to, or like a screen grab of this video that's being claimed to have been uploaded onto YouTube. We got a couple more that I want to show you because you see how this thing is starting to evolve very, very quickly. Here's another account that's posting the same information. Now, I'm not going to go through every single one of these. We're going to look through a few of these, and then because what I want to get to is I want to talk about the potential fallout, the potential lawsuit that might be coming as a result of this. Here, we're going to look at a couple of others. So we just now saw the I'm meme. And here's the downside is that this is, I know that on Twitter or on X these days, that blue check mark just means that you're paying for a subscription. However, a lot of people still view those as verified accounts that bear some news-making authority, that they have some authority when it comes to reporting information and therefore are trustworthy. Now here's where it starts getting a little bit tricky. So that same information that we saw from those other accounts, now we're seeing this information start getting picked up, not just by, rando Twitter handles, but now here we are, oh, that was really zoomed in, but now here we are, FX360 News. Now it's looking a lot more like reputable news source. And if you notice that they're just posting the same information that was coming from this, either the Wall Street Silv or the Mussolino account. And so as this thing starts progressing, it starts catching fire. It starts trending. And if you'll notice, this thing starts trending really fast. And in fact, that day, I mean, if you were like I was, if you were watching the news, you were checking social media, you were trying to find any little bit of information rather than just watch that same 30-second clip on the news, you may have seen this just like I did. This Mark Violets starts trending. And the downside is that Mark Violets, number one, that's not even the guy's actual name. But it starts trending. You can see it was up to over 25,000 posts of sharing this misinformation with the public. Then this information starts getting picked up by actual news sources. On Real America's Voice, this information, or this, you can see that this same picture is posted, at least allegedly. Don't forget, I started this stream with allegedly because I haven't gone through to independently verify every single one of these. And so it's very possible that some of these could be photoshopped, but these are ones that were pulled off of Twitter. And so I'm giving you that as my my saving grace here, because I'm not going in and independently verifying these. Some of these I tried, but it looks like they either may not have been posted or they could have been taken down since I went to look for them today. But this appears to look like Real America's Voice was posting the same misinformation that these random Twitter accounts were. And that's not where it ended. We're going to look at two more here. There's a little bit better screenshot. And then I thought that this was incredibly interesting. So I was curious, how has Mark Violet's trended? Not just on, oh, I'm sorry, this thing is giving me fits. So not just trending on Twitter, but also how is it trending on YouTube search? And you can see that starting on from the 12th to the 13th through the 14th, it went through the roof. And this was the most that this name has ever been searched. Here's the downside, though. Downside for the person who is depicted in these pictures, because I want to introduce you to someone. So this image that you see here was not the shooter. Absolutely not. By all accounts, he was in Rome the day of the shooting. He's got a complete alibi for where he was. And the individual that's identified here, the individual in this picture, is a YouTuber. This is someone who is based in Italy, and he does YouTube channel that comments on soccer matches. And his name is Marco Violi. Violo. Well, let me see if I can clarify that. And so on the news accounts that I saw, sorry, Marco Violi. And so on the news reports that I saw and the interviews with him, he got awoken. This is Marco. He was awoken that morning from just repeated social media interactions where people were tagging him, commenting and texting him and asking, hey, what the heck is going on? Because you're trending on Twitter right now as Trump shooter. And so him being in Italy realizes, okay, well, this isn't me, but he is now dealing with the onslaught. He's now dealing with numerous media requests because he's been identified. So here's the question for you. If you all of a sudden were named as, or falsely named as a Trump shooter, how would you react to that? I'm gonna ask that open question for you in the chat. How would you react to being named like that? What effect would that have on you and have on your life? So what I want to talk about today is defamation, because with all of us who spend any deal of time on social media and spend any deal of time with true crime, with late-breaking news reports when it comes to outcomes of trials, when it comes to what's happened during trials, we run the risk of putting out some false information out there, and that information could harm someone. So let's talk about some defamation and also the limits on your First Amendment rights here in the United States, because you're not allowed to defame people. And I think that it is very possible that we will see some fallout. I think that I'd be surprised if we don't see some sort of lawsuit against some of these people who are publishing this misinformation without checking it first, or at least without some sort of disclaimer of, I'm hearing this from random Twitter, Facebook, X person. We have not verified it, because whenever news sources do that, that also adds to it and leads to the misinformation going out to the masses. Sorry, I'm looking at some of the questions in chat. Alexander, let me come back to that by the end of the stream. If you'll ask that question towards the end, I'll come back to it. Thank you, Samantha. So let's talk about defamation. So you don't have the right to make defamatory statements against other people. That is not protected by the First Amendment. So defamation, and I'm going to look through, I've got my handy dandy law book here, and we're going to look through some of these things so that way I give you very accurate definitions on what some of these things are. Defamation is defined as the invasion of a person's interest in her reputation and good name. Modern defamation is a mixture of common law rules, state statutory provisions, and First Amendment protections. The First Amendment, which protects free speech and freedom of the press, requires the states to provide certain minimum protections when defamatory speech involves matters of public concern. These First Amendment protections intersect and at times conflict with a state's interest in protecting a person's reputation. So, in order to have because we're talking civil here, this is a civil cause of action. You have the right to sue someone for defamation. If the defendant publishes a statement of fact, and that statement refers to the plaintiff, the statement was defamatory, and the statement was false, and with regard to the truth of the statement, the defendant was acting with actual malice, negligent, or liable without regard to fault. And that's where we're going to get into what we talked about very earlier, and I appreciated Dave's question earlier about strict liability, because we're going to talk about being liable without regard to fault, being strict liability, in just a minute. And that the plaintiff suffered pecuniary injury. That's unless injury is presumed. So for this exercise, injury can be presumed. This is defamation per se, because the action that Mr. Violi is accused of committing was a crime. They're not just saying something bad about his good character and good name. This publication of this false statement about him, actually, let's go to that one first. False statement. I think that he already covers. I think that he can easily meet this false statement of fact. This false, if the statement is that he has committed an illegal act, and that's false, and I think that's provably false at this point, then you don't have to show that fault. What was the intent behind it? Whether the posters were, or the news agencies, whether they were negligent or acting with actual malice. You're accusing someone of a crime, you better be pretty sure about it. So let's talk about some of these actions and what you would expect to see. So as we have already worked through here, we've got some reactions. Sorry, I asked a question a minute ago and I didn't publish some of y'all's answers. Mom of 10. Mom of 10 says, I would be so upset. I know firsthand how it feels to have false allegations against me. Someone destroyed my life 5 years ago that way. So you, Mom of 10, you know firsthand what it feels like to suffer through these false statements, through defamation. And so the protections that people get under the First Amendment, which we all hold dear, absolutely, we all love the First Amendment. However, whenever that comes back, whenever that interferes with our lives, whenever that damages your reputation because of someone's reckless conduct, because of someone making these accusations, because of someone accusing you of a crime, obviously that's going to have an impact on your life. And if it is as similar as what we've seen here today, you don't necessarily even have to show that it's causing you actual harm, because they're accusing you of this criminal act. So let's talk about some of these elements. Yes, the defendant has published a statement of fact. So this was a statement of fact. This wasn't just simply whether or not, or an opinion piece as to whether, well, I think that possibly this person could have committed it. Instead, this was a very clear statement of fact. Let's look back to one of these. And we're going to pick on, remember, that first account. That Mussolino. So this is the one that we're going to start with. We're going to presume that this was the very first one that was out there, just for the purposes of discussions for today. So the reason being is because you're going to see how this person, how this Mussolino reacted once they saw the firestorm that they created. And I think it's going to upset you. So, to prove a cause of action for defamation, the plaintiff must establish that the defendant published a statement of fact. So, Mussolino, I think that we can look at this here. We can check that box that this is a statement of fact that, according to the Butler Police Department, the Trump shooter has been arrested at the scene and has been identified as Mark Violets. Now, a rabid Antifa member. Now, as we've already established, there is no Mark Violets. There is a Marco Violi, the Italian national and YouTuber. So, causes of action for defamation don't just go to private individuals. Even media sources can be defendants for defamation. And so, in a previous case, at least here in Texas, the Texas Supreme Court has found that a blogger qualifies under print media. And so that opens them up to that liability as well. Same thing for electronic media. I think that some of these other YouTubers who were trying to get the scoop, the ones who were trying to get this information out there as fast as possible, that they were live streaming this and showing these very same tweets, they may very well be wrapped up. They might get swept up in a very large cause of action for not checking these sources. Because as we can see, they qualify under print and or electronic media. So was there publication? That's one of the next questions that we have to ask is, was there publication to a third person? Well, whenever you put something on Twitter, open like this, open to the public, and it starts getting retweeted all around the world, I'm pretty sure we checked that box whether or not it was published to a third person. Ivan, good to see you this evening. How are you doing, man? Yes, we are in a Succession boardroom. Miss Vixen, it's fantastic to see you in here this evening as well. And Cashette, oh, you're naughty. Victor asks, when you've been adequately accused of so many things, been falsely accused, doesn't hurt as much. So there's that. Well, not necessarily, because whenever you're accused of something and you really didn't do it, and you've already been accused of other things, maybe falsely, it makes it a lot more likely that other people are going to believe those, which then just makes it more likely that your good name is going to get tarnished. Chad has a fantastic question. When the, ooh, sorry, that's not on the screen. Let me see if I can fix that. There, Chad asks, when the news writes a retraction, can they still be sued? That is a fantastic question. We're going to get to that here in just a minute, because that's going to be one of the steps that we're going to talk about. And I won't spoil it. I'll come back to that, Chad, because that's a fantastic question. Very, very good advice. Always verify info before you start distributing, especially for those of us that are trying to get information out there on the public to the public as quick as possible. It's better to be right than it is to be first. So let's talk about some more of these elements, and we're for the sake of time, we're not going to go through every single detail. I'm not going to give you a full-on legal treatise on what is and is not defamation. I'll give you a couple of examples, but more importantly, what we're going to get to in a minute is going to be what you need to do if you find yourself in this position where you get sued for defamation, or if you get accused of defamation. So let's talk about Mr. Violi here for a moment. Because remember, this is a picture of Mr. Violi. And so I'm not sure where this picture was taken. It looks like it was taken from his YouTube channel, even though he was falsely identified as Mr. Mark Violets. So he may very well qualify because of his YouTube presence and because he does commentary on soccer. I'm not sure how large his channel is. I haven't gone to look at that very recently, but you guys can look into it. You can, if you look at it and you find out, let us know in chat how many subscribers he has, because we're going to give him the most amount of protection. I'm sorry, the least amount of protection for Mr. Violi. We're going to presume that he is a public figure, even a public figure for a limited purpose, because private individuals, like here, let's pick on, we're going to pick on Miss Debbie here for a moment. Miss Debbie is a private citizen. At least to the best of my knowledge, Miss Debbie is not a famous person. She hasn't acted in a whole bunch of movies. She's not a news anchor. She's not an elected official. If so, Miss Debbie, don't tell us right now, because I'm using you as an example. So Miss Debbie, as a private individual, doesn't want her business out there and doesn't want it to be public. And so she has chosen to maintain that very private life. Now, unfortunately, sometimes you can get drug into the spotlight. You get drug into public, and so you are now a public figure. Sometimes you're just a public figure for a limited purpose. So for example, the shooter's father, the actual shooter, not Mr. Marco Violi's father, but the actual shooter's father, he could very well also be a public figure for a limited purpose now, because, I mean, he's kind of drug into the spotlight. His son just now attempted to assassinate the president, and his son was killed in response by the Secret Service. And so I've seen where he's been giving statements to the media. The media has been commenting on whether or not he had provided the firearm, because apparently, according to the media sources that I've heard, he had provided this firearm to his son that day because his son said that he was going to the shooting range. Nothing nefarious about that, but his name is at least out there in the public. So Mr. Violi here, by having this YouTube channel, let's give him some fewer protections and say that he is a public figure for a limited purpose. Ivan asks, does going viral qualify one as being a public figure, even though they've gained popularity by accident? It's going to depend on what they went viral for, honestly. If it was something that someone intentionally created a video and they intentionally put it out there to go viral, and they knew that they were Hi, hi, Toxic. It's me, Marthew. So if they put this video out there to go viral, they intentionally put it out there into the public, then you know what? Yeah, they're probably going to also be considered a public figure because they put it out there. If they're walking through the mall and they trip, fall into the fountain because they're looking at their camera, you know, they didn't intend to go viral, but you know, they might be more of a limited purpose public figure at that point. So the let's talk about these limited purpose public figures. A limited purpose public figure is a public figure, or I'm sorry, they are public figures only for a limited range of issues surrounding a particular public controversy. For example, here's some case law that says that a television reporter who voluntarily involved himself in controversy was limited purpose public figure. And so whenever it comes to determining whether or not someone is a limited purpose public figure, courts apply a three-part test to determine whether someone is a limited purpose public figure. Number one, the controversy must be public. That is, people other than the immediate participants in the controversy must discuss it and must be likely to feel the impact of its resolution. Number two, the plaintiff must have had more than a trivial or tangential role in the controversy. And three, the defamation must be related to the plaintiff's participation in the controversy. So, even though I'm proposing that we give him the fewest amount of protections as a limited purpose public figure, it's still going to be very difficult to argue that Mr. Violi is in fact a limited purpose public figure as it relates to the Trump as it relates to the Trump assassination attempt. Sorry, y'all, it's been a long day. Because he didn't ask to be a part of this. He didn't inject himself into the controversy or into the media. But just for the sake of argument, if he is a limited purpose public figure, then he's going to have fewer protections than Private Miss Debbie. All right, so let's move on to whether or not the statement was defamatory. So, in order to have a cause of action for defamation, the statement itself has to be defamatory. So, what does that mean? Let me ask you. So, you tell me in chat, even though I'm about to start explaining here in just a moment, tell me in chat, what do you think that a defamatory statement is? What's the definition for a defamatory statement? While y'all are typing that, no cheaters. A defamatory statement is a statement that tends to harm or lower the plaintiff's reputation within the community or deter others from associating or dealing with the plaintiff. How close did y'all get? So, yeah, Cachette, thanks. I appreciate that. Spot on. Yeah, Debbie, pretty close there. Chad, yeah. All of this contributes to defamation. Now, we're talking about defamation right now just as a whole, just because most people understand what... most people know what defamation is. But defamation technically is, it's technically two different parts. So you have libel and you have slander. Libel is whenever you make a defamatory statement about someone and you put it into print. Slander is whenever you make a defamatory statement about someone verbally. And so sometimes, I know, Cachette, I know I didn't give you enough time. Oh, sorry. I know I didn't give you enough time there to answer, but I'm trying to speed it along just a little bit. But you know what, though? You got it right. So Because you said it was exactly what I said. I had to fix poor Toxic over here. All right, so let's talk about this. So even though we're talking about defamation as a whole, it's going to apply whether or not it is libel or slander. So let's ask this question. Was this statement, remember, we're picking on Mussolino over here, because again, like I said a minute ago, I think this may have been the very first one that put it out there to the public. And so I'm going to show you why in a minute. So let's ask, was this statement by Mussolino, was this reasonably capable of a defamatory meaning? Absolutely. It's checking all the boxes. To determine whether the statement is reasonably capable of a defamatory meaning, the court must consider the type of defamation alleged, and 2, whether the statement was ambiguous. Well, this is not an ambiguous statement. You're not saying that he was a cheat or he was a crook. Said that he was the Trump shooter, and said that he was a rabid Antifa member, said that he had been arrested at the scene, placed a picture of Mr. Violi within the chat, I'm sorry, within the tweet, and then also, even though named him as Mark Violets, even though his name is actually Marco Violi, he has identified him here, and yes, very accusatory, Cachette. So let's look at where we go next with it. So let's talk about harm. So some types of evidence, actually, I'm sorry, some types of defamation require harm. In fact, most types of defamation require actual harm. So if me and my buddies are hanging out and one of them goes, "Oh, you cheated on that one," well, it depends on whether or not I'm actually harmed by that. If all of my other buddies sitting around, we all kind of get a laugh out of it because he's just, my friend is picking on me. Well, you know, what's the harm to me there? How am I going to demonstrate that I have been harmed by one friend telling the other friend, "Oh, you know, Matthew cheated on that card game"? I've got to show that I've been actually harmed by it, but not all cases. So, strict liability is what occurs whenever there is no requirement for malice. There doesn't have to be negative intent. Let me give you an example. Speeding is a strict liability crime. So murder requires intent. You have to intend to cause this harm. You can't just, you know, just because someone dies doesn't mean that you are automatically going to be convicted of murder, or that you're guilty of murder. Speeding, though, it doesn't matter whether you intended to speed or not. If your vehicle is speeding, whenever the officer clocks you, that's what's called a strict liability crime. No intent. There's no requirement for the state to prove intent that you have tried to speed. So, strict liability, because we're going to talk about some Supreme Court cases, since this comes down to, because this implicates some First Amendment protections. So in this, let me find you a good quote here to read from this case. So this is a Dun and Bradstreet case from the U.S. Supreme Court in 1985. In a strict liability case, the plaintiff does not have to prove the defendant knew the statement was false. If the statement is false, the defendant is liable. And so these strict liability cases whenever you have alleged that someone has committed a crime or done something horrible, in fact, even falsely accusing someone of having an STD, these sorts of things are just, you have this presumption that it is harmful. And so whenever you have cases like that, where there is a presumption of harm on someone, you don't have to necessarily show that there has been, that you have actually been harmed, because we call it defamation per se. They're per se liable because of these actions, because of these statements. But let's talk about some, in case you are trying to show harm, these are the types of harms that you want to show. If it, cachette, you're nailing it there. If it injures your occupation, if it imputes a loathsome disease, if it imputes sexual misconduct, if it imputes a crime, these are what are known as defamation per se. And so by saying these things, just by saying these things, it's presumed to have caused harm. You don't necessarily have to show that if you accuse someone of a crime, like has happened here to Mr. Violi, as done by @Mussolino, if that imputes a crime, you are presumed to have harmed that person, and that person is presumed to have suffered some sort of damage. They've suffered that injury. We're not going to spend very much time talking about how much damages, how much money could be at stake here, but it could be a lot. It could be in the millions of dollars. Whenever you're talking about defamation and the harm that has come to Mr. Violi here, depends on where he sues. And it depends on what happens, because there is the potential for what's called punitive damages, also known as exemplary damages. And so whenever someone makes these statements and they have malice, I'm not sure where Mussolino here got their information from, but they say that they got it from the Butler Police Department. That's something that they're going to have to prove that actually occurred. Because these exemplary damages, if that's approved, if you prove that they acted with this sort of malice and the jury awards these exemplary damages, that can be in the millions of dollars. So let's talk about, and I told someone just a moment ago, let's see if I can find, I'm looking back through the chat because someone asked a great question earlier. Chad had the fantastic question. So, before you bring suit, what you need to do is you need to reach out to whoever it is that has committed this defamatory act, and you need to ask them to issue an apology or a retraction. So, Mr. Violi here really should reach out to Mussolino and ask for a retraction. And whenever you ask for that retraction, it needs to be in the same manner that the original statement was made. And so whenever you do that, if Mussolino here puts out this retraction and says, listen, I thought I had it on good authority. I apologize to Mr. Violi. I did not do he did not do what I accused him of doing. I made a mistake. His name is absolutely cleared. Well, that doesn't, I'm sorry, Chad, I missed your, I dismissed your comment just a little bit too early. So yes, they can still be sued even after issuing a retraction. The difference, though, is that if they issue that retraction, then that mitigates some of the damages and eliminates some of the punitive damages, these millions of dollars worth of damages that could otherwise be sought, and instead limits the plaintiff to their actual damages. Because if someone makes this defamatory statement, gets called out on it by the person who has been defamed, and then immediately issues this retraction, then it's a lot harder to argue at that point that they've acted with this malice and that this is just a terrible person who is really out to destroy Mr. Violi's good name. Cachette, yes, Butler PD could have called foul on this. They very well could have put out statements and said, we see this happening and it is not true. Here's the downside. They were already, I'm pretty sure, all hands on deck dealing with this actual assassination attempt and trying to get to the bottom of this, dealing with one person who had just now been murdered, two people in the crowd who were seriously injured, as well as a president who had just now been harmed. And so, of course, we can always blame the weather. So let's talk about the lawsuit for a moment, because I think that there is a very real possibility that we will see this, that we will see a lawsuit that comes from this. And let me see if I can make this work. Because remember that intent, that malice, those negative actions from this old Mussolino. Well, if Chad, it's not required, but it could very well limit some of your damages that you're seeking at trial if they don't take the action to retract it, because you have to try to mitigate some of your damages. This cause of action. So let me speak just for Texas. I know that we've got some international people here, but for Texas, the cause of action has a 1-year statute of limitations. So you have to file your lawsuit within 1 year of this defamatory statement, or maybe it's upon learning of or should have learned of the defamatory statement. Whatever starts your statute of limitations, you've got 1 year. Whether or not you have to do it, no, you don't, but it's going to, imagine if you let it sit. So Mr. Violi here lets this thing just percolate for a whole year and then files suit, but never asks them to retract it. Well, you needed to take some sort of steps in order to mitigate your damages in order to then be able to pursue those punitive damages. But what we're going to look at now is we're going to look at let's go live right now. We're going to go live to Mr. Mussolino's Twitter account. So as you can see, Mr. Violet's here. I'm sorry, Mr. Mussolino. He looks really apologetic about this, doesn't he? Doesn't he look like this was just all a big misunderstanding? I mean, if you look at his picture, he's overlaid it with the picture, his face with Mr. Violet's, or I'm sorry, Mr. Violi. As his background picture, he's got Mark Violet's trending as his background, as his header for his Twitter profile. Now, I don't expect all of you to be able to read this. I'm not even sure exactly what language it is. Let's just say he's in Brazil. Fortunately, Twitter lets us translate it. The one who almost started a civil war in America. He looks really apologetic about making these statements. I mean, he is openly acknowledging that Mark Violet's was trending. He seems pretty proud of this. Doesn't seem that very intent on making or issuing a retraction. And so, even if he did issue a retraction, I don't know what good that would be. But a person could mitigate some of those damages by doing that. Whether or not that would be effective, that's going to be a question for the jury at the end of the case. Now, let's spend just a few minutes, because I know that I'm going just a little bit over on time, but if you'll give me just a couple of minutes, I want to explain these anti-SLAPP laws that you all definitely need to know about. Anybody here know what anti-SLAPP stands for? Cash out, I'm not going to give it away. I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to let you guess it in chat. Anti-SLAPP lawsuits are meant to protect First Amendment speech. The downside is that it ends up doing the exact opposite in very many occasions. And so whenever you file an anti-SLAPP motion in a defamation case, Elliot, you are spot on, my friend. Cachette's going to show up here in just a minute, and she's going to be upset that I didn't give her more time. But Elliot is on top of it. That's all right. Yes. So a lot of states have adopted these anti-SLAPP statutes. And so the way that works is, let's presume that Mr. Violi here files this lawsuit. We're going to pretend that he files it in Texas. And he's going to sue Mr. Mussolino here in Texas. He files a lawsuit and gets him served. Well, Mr. Mussolino, as every defendant does in a defamation lawsuit, it is nearly automatic to file an anti-SLAPP motion. And what that does is whenever you file an anti-SLAPP motion, that then stops all of the discovery on the case. It stops everything and says, hey, this lawsuit is being filed because, sorry, hit my mic. This lawsuit is being filed against me for exercising my First Amendment rights. And this infringes upon my First Amendment rights to file a lawsuit because it's trying to shut me up. Well, yeah, Mr. Mussolino over here is probably the very first one to come out to say, they're just trying to shut me up. They don't want me speaking my truths. And so that's what he files, is this anti-SLAPP motion. And what that does is it freezes all the discovery, freezes the entire case, and it puts all of the burden on the plaintiff. And the plaintiff then must put forward evidence to every single element to their cause of action. So all these things, and I know that I've spent the last hour discussing at least a lot of the elements when it comes to what constitutes a defamation case, but that's not all of it. There are a lot of factors to consider whenever you're looking at whether or not someone has actually committed defamation. And a lot of this, unfortunately, it's choose your own adventure. So if it's, are you a public figure? Yes. Okay, well, you've got to prove these things. If are you a public figure for a limited purpose? Okay, well, then you need to prove these things. And so whenever this anti-SLAPP motion is filed, the plaintiff, so Mr. Violi here, is going to immediately have to put on or file a response that provides evidence for to prove a prima facie case for each element to his cause of action. And if he doesn't do that, can you guys guess what happens if this anti-SLAPP motion gets filed? Mr. Violi doesn't have enough evidence for his case. Well, one thing that he can do is he could request some very limited discovery. Let's say there's some information out there that Mr. Violi needs in order to prove his case. The court, on a limited basis, can approve some very limited discovery. But then the defendant has to, the plaintiff, Mr. Violi, is going to have to put on all of his evidence, not all of his evidence, but at least enough to prove every single element and to show that he's likely going to be successful. If he doesn't, for those of you that haven't had a chance to guess yet, I'm going to give you the answer. If Mr. Violi does not provide a prima facie case, does not give evidence for all of the elements for his defamation cause of action, the case gets dismissed. And it's mandatory that the plaintiff would have to pay the defendants. So Mr. Violi here would have to pay Mussolino's attorney's fees. And then on top of that, the court can decide whether or not to issue sanctions against the plaintiff for filing this lawsuit. And the sanctions can also be extremely costly. So, yeah, it's anti-high fives. Yep, anti-slap hands. Miss Debbie, yep, that would be nice if it was, but unfortunately, that is not it. Thal. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, let me go back. Right, so anti-SLAPP laws are state laws. And so, since the plaintiff is a non-citizen, he'd have to file in federal court, which would be quickly dismissed. Not exactly. So, I think that there could be an argument. I need to do some more research on this, because if let me go back to, so if Violi here, he is an Italian citizen. Mussolino here, let's just we saw from his Twitter page just a moment ago that he's in Brazil. Let's just presume both of those are true. Let's presume that one is an Italian citizen and the other one is in Brazil and is a Brazilian citizen. They're going to have to show some reason to file this suit in an American court because they don't necessarily have a whole lot of connection with the United States. Well, I think, and this is what I would want to do a little bit more research about, is because this is through an American company. This is using Twitter, or X, I don't know what we're going to call it. Hopefully we can go back to calling it Twitter. I'm going to just keep calling it Twitter. I'm presuming that you all know what Twitter and X are the same thing. So this is an American company. There is a possibility that within the terms of service, I haven't reviewed those 80 pages of terms of service yet, but there could be terms of service that says that use of this platform consents to jurisdiction within the United States. And so Mussolino could have subjected himself to the U.S. jurisdiction by using Twitter. And let's say that Twitter, because we know that Elon Musk is a big fan of Texas, let's say that he's moving, like he's already started moving SpaceX to Texas. He's moving Tesla to Texas if it's not already here. He might very well be moving Twitter to Texas pretty soon. And so he could very well put that any causes of action arising out of use of Twitter have to be filed in Texas. Well, as you point out here, Elliot, yes, it would need to be in federal court. You've got what we call diversity. There's diversity between the plaintiffs because they're both not from the same state, or it is international. And so you could, if the Twitter terms of service say that Texas law applies, and we're just presuming that we're using Texas here because I'm a Texas attorney. Is that true? Did he announce that today? I just had a feeling that it was coming. So presuming that we're applying Texas law, federal courts can apply the state laws to these actions that are being held in federal courts. And so even though these are state laws, Elliot, just like you accurately point out, these are state laws. The anti-SLAPP laws are state laws. Those state laws can be applied in federal court because the federal judge just gets, okay, here's all of the state law that I'm to apply, takes the elements, looks at the elements, applies Texas case law on it, while also looking at other federal law, interpreting that same state law, or other federal law interpreting similar state laws from other states. And that lawsuit could very well still go forward. So those are my thoughts. Those are my thoughts on the possibility of this Trump assassination attempt and the rush to get some information out to the public as quick as possible, which led to what was obviously some false information that was published. And obviously somebody was caught in the middle. I would ask you to look into some of this information, and you will see how many news stories are out there right now talking about the impact that this has had on Mr. Violi. And it's unfortunate that he was caught up in this, intentionally targeted. For what purpose? Who knows? But for all of us, because I see a lot of people here who I know, I see a lot of people in chat who I know to be very active and involved in the true crime community. A lot of us, in our rush to get information out to the public, we have to be careful. We have to be careful about the information that we put out there, because even though you might put out something on your private Twitter that you might think is satire or you might think is funny, if it's likely to be interpreted and it's not very clearly to be satire, then if you anticipate, or it could reasonably be expected, that this is going to get picked up by a news agency and get shared across the entire internet, just like this. I mean, from the outside looking at it, yeah, you can expect that if you announce, minutes after an assassination attempt, poor Calypsons. Sorry, Amber. I promise I'm not targeting you. Whenever you publish something like this, like what Mussolino here did, you should expect that that's going to be published by third parties, that's going to be shared far and wide, especially whenever you attribute it to a reputable source, like according to the Butler Police Department. That gives it that air of credibility. And so in our rush to get information out there, we need to make sure that we are protecting ourselves. We need to make sure that we are protecting our own livelihoods. Make sure that we are protecting our families, because if we rush to be first and we're wrong, then we're going to be stuck in lawsuits. We're going to be stuck dealing in litigation. You're going to be stuck having to pay people like me to go in and defend you. Although I love each and every one of you, bottom of my heart. I don't want you to have to take money out of your pocket and out of your kids' mouths to pay me my hourly rate, $250 an hour, simply because you tweeted something that you weren't ready to be read aloud in court. So that's all that I have. I would love to hang out with you all the rest of the evening, but I want to give some time back to you. So unless there are some last minute questions, let's see. I know that we had asked someone earlier. Someone had a question. Alexander, if you are still in chat, because I'm not going to hold everybody hostage if you're not still here. Must be present to ask. Alexander, if you're still here in chat, ask your question again, or just give me a wave so that way I know that you're here. And then I will answer that question. Or if any of the rest of you have unrelated questions, you just want to ask a couple of questions here in the last couple of minutes that we have, I would be happy to field those. And while you are writing out any last minute questions you have, we're going to give you all a sneak peek. I'm not going to play it. I'm just going to show it. I'll give you a sneak peek of what this Thursday's video is going to be. Oh, I'm trying to give you a sneak peek of this Thursday's video. For those of you that don't know, oh, by the way, let's see. I've been practicing with my stream elements. Let's see how well any of these are actually working for me. Oh, I have some work to do. My Discord command is not working. All right, you know what I might do, just because I'm feeling fun? I've never done a members only premiere for our videos, but I think I'm going to do that this week because I've got it ready to go. And so I know that some of y'all are, because I see I Rescue Dogs, I see you in chat. Beautiful blue gavel there on the next to your name. So for everybody that's members, I'm going to do a members premiere first for this video this week. Y'all vote for me. You tell me, when do you y'all want this thing to drop? I want to make sure you've got time. It's a short one. It's only a few minutes long. But it's not a short. It's our normal long form. While y'all are answering that, here it is. Here's your sneak peek. No. Cash Out, I promise you, I'm not gonna drop it when the podcast is, because this thing is going to publish to everybody. You're all going to see it by noon on Thursday, whether you become a member or not. But for everyone who is a member, how about let's schedule that to go out in 30 minutes. That'll give me time to schedule it. Paula, look at that, brand new member. Oh, well, that's neat. I didn't realize that we would get the beautiful stickers to go along with it. I'm still learning a lot of this live stuff. I'm not nearly as good as Scott or Lawyer You Know yet, or Kurt over at Uncivil. Still working on it. But this is this week's video. This week's video is how to serve on a jury successfully. And we're going to go over what you can and can't do, how jurors are actually tasked with reaching a verdict, and what happens whenever you're deadlocked. Because not everybody knows that, and I want to make sure that the public is well informed. So we're going to wrap up. We're going to wrap up now. We're going to schedule this for members only to come out in the next, I might be able to get it out by 8 p.m. 8 p.m. Central Time. So in the next 8 minutes. How about that? So if you are a member, you'll see this pop up. If you're not, then you will catch this on Thursday. And if we don't have any other questions, oh, Chad, sorry, I almost missed one. I know I've fake ended like 3 times now. Chad asks, if someone spreads information that some may interpret as misinformation, but it's clearly labeled for entertainment purposes only, does that waive liability? So that's going to come back to whether or not it is in fact a defamatory statement. So it might be misinformation, but it also might be that it doesn't actually harm someone. So you're not actually harming their character. Like misinformation could be that Matthew's favorite color is blue. It's not. My favorite color is black. So if you said my favorite color is blue, that's false. That's not a true statement. But how is that harming me? How does that harm my character? If you said that I liked clowns, that's probably going to be defamatory because that is absolutely not true and that hurts my character. Let's see, Miss Debbie, you said that you had a question. Miss Debbie asks, I had my sister as a personal representative for probate. How long can she have that power? I'm not sure. In Texas, you have to be an attorney in order to represent someone and probate a will. If they are... If you have given your sister power of attorney, it's you know what? I don't know that I have a good answer because that's going to come back to Oklahoma state law. Because if I remember correctly, Miss Debbie, you are in the Sooner state, so it's going to come back to your law, your Oklahoma law, especially if you're asking about how long a what is that? A power of attorney would last for. I'm presuming that's what you're asking about, rather than asking about this personal representative. If by personal representative you mean that you have designated her as the executor under your will, then, I mean, as long as your will is good, then she can still be your personal representative. However, that would not take effect until you get out of here. So hopefully you've got a long time until that happens. All right, guys and gals, that's where we're going to end. I'm going to give you some time back. I'm going to hustle to go get that video scheduled for members only. Let's see what that does for analytics. And that will be out by here in the next 5 minutes. So if there are no other questions, then I want to thank you all for being here. I want to tell you how much that I absolutely appreciate each and every one of you. And don't forget that an educated society is a free society. Make sure that you are being educated. Make sure that you know what your laws are, because these dictate our daily lives. And with that, I appreciate you all. Bye, y'all.